In this demo, we're going to implement paging functionality. As an example, we'll do this on our authors collection. We're looking at the getAuthors action in the authors controller. Here we will want to accept two additional parameters from the query string, page number and page size. I say additional because if we look at the action signature, we see it already has a parameter of type authors resource parameters. The fromQuery attribute tells us that this is coming from the query string. So let's have a look at that. It contains a main category property used for filtering and a search query property used for searching. These are bound from the main category query string value and the search query string value respectively. So here we can add the page number and page size. Page number signifies the page we want to get and page size signifies the maximum amount of items on the page. It's important to give these parameters default values. Like that, we can ensure that if a consumer doesn't pass in values for these parameters, the defaults will be used. I've set the default for page number to 1 and the default for page size to 10. There's another thing we have to think about, a maximum page size. We've got a default here now, 10, but a consumer of an API can still input 1000 and that will be accepted. And that shouldn't be the case, as it could have a negative effect on performance. So let's add a constant that defines the maximum page size, say 20. I tend to have a maximum page size value for each resource collection instead of one general maximum page size that's used across resource collections. This is because you might want to let consumers of the API get a maximum of 10 authors per page, but maybe 20 courses per page when implementing paging on that collection. The parameters object, authors resource parameters, is already scoped to authors, so that's where this value fits. So now we have a maximum page size. Up next is taking that into account when setting the page size. We need to check if the page size isn't higher than the maximum page size. And if it is, we set it to the maximum page size. And with that, we've got our parameters. Back to the action. We see that the authors resource parameters object is passed to the getAuthors_async method on the repository. Let's have a look at that. Currently, filtering and searching are implemented. We want to add paging functionality to this. As mentioned right before the demo, we need to make sure that our pagination is done at database level and not after the records have already been fetched from the database. That can be done thanks to deferred execution. We learned about that in the previous module. So let's scroll down a bit here. What we can do is apply paging to this collection before calling toListAsync. It is important to add the paging functionality last, because we want to page on the filtered and searched collection. If we add paging first, the where and other extension methods will execute on the small, paged set of data instead of on all the data, and that would lead to incorrect results. What we first want to do is skip an amount of authors, the page size times the requested page number minus 1. That will ensure that if, for example, page 2 is requested, the amount of items on page 1 will be skipped. And then we take the current requested page size. One more thing. If we scroll up, we see an if statement that ensures that all authors are returned if the main category and search query are empty. That's great if you only have those two pieces of functionality implemented. But in our case, we want to get rid of that. We want to apply paging no matter what, and that includes when no filter or search query has been inputted. Alright, that should be it. Let's give this a try. First, let's send a request to API/authors. We don't pass through any paging parameters. So it should return us a paged set with the default restrictions, the first page of 10 authors. There's only 7 authors in our database, and these are returned, but that doesn't really prove that the default restrictions have been applied. For that, let's have a look at the console window. We see a warning about using skip or take without an order by operator. Don't worry about that for now. Sorting, which will use the order by operating, is coming up in the next module. What we also see in the query that's sent to the database is that a limit and an offset have been applied. Those map to our paging parameters. So even though we don't see it, they have been applied. Now let's pass through a few paging parameters. There's a few requests lined up here. Let's say we want to get the first page of data with a maximum of 5 authors per page. And indeed, this time we only get back these 5 authors. Now let's try getting the second page of data by changing the page number parameter to 2. And there we go, we only get back the 2 authors that weren't previously included. But something seems to be missing. If we're paging through data, especially with defaults in place, we should return some metadata related to the resource collection. Like that, the consumer can get essential information on it, like the current page or total amount of pages, together with the response.